So it's a great pleasure for me to come here. It was a great pleasure for me to come and be asked to be an assessor when the Society was nominated for a Queen's Award, because being nominated for a Queen's Award is really a great honour in its own right. But there's no guarantee that you're actually going to win one, even having been nominated. These are highly sought after. Queen's Award for Voluntary Service recognises the phenomenal work that many volunteers, particularly up and down the country, belonging to all sorts of groups, do on behalf of society and their local communities, frankly, making the world a better place. And I can't think of a more prime example than the Manchester Transport Society. I was absolutely blown away when I came here. It seems a very long time ago, Dennis. It was pre-COVID, of course, pre the lockdown. And I walked in here and it was just a hive of industry. There were so many of you volunteers. I don't know if any of you, I know some of you were here that day. Chris was certainly here, and I met a number of you. But there were so many volunteers here that day. And it's the Queen's Award, the Queen makes this award to recognise the work of volunteers for organisations like this. Because as I say, it's highly competitive. So winning it really is a tremendous accolade. When I came here, one of the first things that struck me was the smell. It's a wonderful smell. You probably don't, no, it's a nice smell. You probably don't notice it anymore. But I walked in today, this afternoon, and immediately the smell came to me. It's marvellous, isn't it? It's this lovely warm smell of engines and bodywork and so forth. And it reminds me of my childhood. Because, of course, I used buses in my childhood. I was teased not long ago by a friend of mine who said, "You haven't been on a bus for years. I'm going to take you on a bus." And it's true, because for many years I've driven a car. I've not been on a bus. But I used to love buses. And my husband was beside himself in knowing that we were coming here today, because he's been desperate to come here. And he's been badgering Chris on all sorts of things, but he particularly wanted to see those lovely clips with the paper tickets that used to be punched. And Chris has just told me that in fact there was one man whose job it was that at the end of the day they emptied the machine that punched the holes in the tickets, and they had to count every single little tiny roundel of paper and catalogue them according to their different colours and therefore their different values to reconcile the number of tickets that had been punched and sold to the amount of money that had been taken. How do you fancy a job like that? I don't imagine anybody would do a job like that. But one of the other things that really struck me when I visited was that I've been to many museums in my life, and I've never been to a museum where so many of the major artifacts are owned by the volunteers, because it's the volunteers who themselves have bought them and restored them. And I cannot imagine that there are many museums where the people who work in them actually ask their families for big birthday presents of bits for an engine, or new covers for the seats, or another piece of metalwork. But I happen to know that there are many people here, including one standing behind me, who regularly does that to his family. I mean, it's just remarkable. So this museum has been going now for 40 years. It is operated, in fact 42 years now, it is operated on behalf of the Transport for Greater Manchester, but it is entirely operated by voluntary effort. And although you've got, how many members have you got in the society?
350.
350 members of the society, but I know there are 53 active working volunteers. And between you, the year before lockdown, I think you put in something like 17,500 hours of voluntary work. That's incredible. And the work isn't just about restoring these wonderful buses and the engines inside them, and all the other artifacts that you collect. And of course, there's a huge archive here as well. Peter made some reference to it. An enormous archive, which is, I know, a resource utilised by people all over the world. So there's all of that, but besides that, the other thing that this museum does so brilliantly is it not only welcomes visitors in, and they have something like 20,000 visitors a year now. You are one of the top-rated visitor attractions in Greater Manchester, and a fully accredited museum. And that's no mean feat, I can tell you. To be a fully accredited museum nationally is really another huge accolade. But you also you have enormous numbers of work opportunities. You have all sorts of courses. You have all sorts of working with physically disabled people, mentally disabled people, people who have mental health issues, people with dementia, and elderly people who are perhaps a little bit lost in the world today and come back here. And of course, immediately, what do? They relive their entire lives, not just their childhoods, but their growing up and their young adult lives and so forth. And it's wonderful to listen to some of the stories. So this is a place which is of enormous social as well as economic benefit to the local community. So frankly, in writing the citation, it was quite an easy job for me. It was an easy sell to say, this is an outstanding organisation, and it really does warrant Her Majesty the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. And so I'm absolutely thrilled, Dennis. Congratulations to you, to all of your colleagues, and it's my pleasure, on behalf of the Lieutenancy and the Queen, to make this award to you today.